Have you ever seen a dog bark and save a life? I'm not talking about a loyal pet protecting its owner from a stranger or chasing off another dog. I mean a bark that quite literally changed the course of an entire day, maybe even an entire life, in just a few seconds. What if I told you that one single moment, one suspicious sniff from a dog named Bruno, stopped a tragedy before it could even happen? That's exactly what happened on a sunny Friday morning at Oak Ridge Elementary School, and it's a moment I promise you'll never forget. So stick with me until the end, because this isn't just about a dog, it's about a hero. And hey, if you believe that real-life heroes deserve their stories told, make sure you hit that like button right now and subscribe to K9 Era, because what you're about to hear will make you look at every police K9 in a whole new way. The day started like any other at Oak Ridge Elementary. The sky was painted with streaks of gold and soft blue, the air buzzing with the sound of children's laughter as they spilled into the playground before the first bell. Parents waved goodbye, cars pulled away, and teachers stood at the entrances greeting students. In the middle of all that morning bustle, Officer Daniels arrived with his partner, Bruno, a striking black and tan German shepherd with sharp amber eyes and a calm but alert stance. They were there for a scheduled school safety demonstration, something the local police did every few months to build trust with the community. Bruno wasn't just any dog, he was one of the best in the K9 unit, trained for search, rescue, and detection. The moment the children saw him, excitement swept through the air like a wave. "Look at the police dog," one little girl shouted, and soon dozens of small voices were calling his name after Officer Daniels introduced him. The demonstration began in the gymnasium, with Daniels explaining how K9 dogs help officers, how they can track missing people, detect dangerous substances, and even protect their handlers. Bruno performed every command flawlessly: sit, stay, heel, fetch a hidden toy, earning applause and giggles from the students. Daniels smiled as he saw how captivated they were. But in the middle of all that light-hearted energy, something happened that made the entire atmosphere shift in an instant. As Daniels gave the next command, Bruno suddenly stopped mid-step. His ears pricked forward. His nostrils flared. His head turned sharply toward the far corner of the gym, near the door where the children's backpacks and lunchboxes had been placed in neat rows earlier that morning. Without waiting for a signal, Bruno moved, slowly at first, then with purpose, straight toward a small red lunchbox sitting by itself, slightly apart from the others. Daniels's smile faded. He knew that look in Bruno's eyes. This wasn't curiosity. This was focus. Bruno sniffed the lunchbox once, twice, then suddenly let out a deep, sharp bark that echoed through the gym. It wasn't playful. It wasn't random. It was the bark every K9 handler knows, the warning bark. In an instant, Daniels's training kicked in. "Everyone, step back," he called out firmly, his voice carrying enough authority that even the giggling children grew silent and obeyed. Bruno continued barking, his body tense, his gaze locked on that little red lunchbox as though it was the most important thing in the world. Mrs. Moore, the second-grade teacher standing nearby, frowned. "What's wrong? Is something in there?" she asked, glancing at the lunchbox with confusion. Daniels didn't answer her directly. "Keep everyone back," he said, already moving closer with caution. He had seen Bruno detect dangerous substances before, and this was the same unshakable reaction. The once lively gym was now filled with whispers and the sound of Bruno's steady warning. Even the youngest children could sense something wasn't right. Daniels reached down carefully, his hands steady despite the adrenaline now coursing through him. Bruno didn't break focus for a second. Lifting the lunchbox gently, Daniels could feel the weight inside. It didn't seem unusual, but weight alone meant nothing. He turned and walked toward the exit, keeping it at arm's length. Once outside, he set it down on the concrete away from the building. Bruno sat beside him, his eyes never leaving it, tail still. To the untrained eye, it was just a lunchbox. But to Bruno, it was something else entirely, something that didn't belong, something dangerous. And in that moment, everyone inside the school had no idea just how close they were to a very real danger, one that Bruno had just uncovered. The red lunchbox sat on the pavement outside the school, looking so harmless under the morning sun that it was hard to believe the air around it felt charged with unease. Inside the gym, the children were still murmuring to one another in low, nervous voices, the earlier excitement completely replaced by confusion. Officer Daniels had returned just long enough to tell Mrs. Moore to move the students to the other side of the building, away from the windows, just as a precaution. He didn't want to scare them, but he knew Bruno's instincts were never wrong. As the kids were being led out, Ethan, a small, thin boy with sandy hair and large brown eyes, stood frozen by the bleachers. Daniels noticed him and gently asked, "Hey, buddy, is that your lunchbox?" Ethan hesitated, glancing toward the red lunchbox outside as if unsure whether he should answer. "Why yes, sir," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "But I didn't pack it this morning. My mom usually does, but she was working late. Our neighbor said he'd help me get ready for school, so he made my lunch and handed it to me before I left." Those words made something cold settle in Danielle's stomach. A child's lunchbox prepared by someone other than a parent, someone who wasn't part of the school, could mean nothing, or it could mean everything. Daniels nodded slowly, trying to keep his expression calm so as not to frighten Ethan, but inside, his thoughts were racing. Outside, Bruno was still seated in front of the lunchbox, watching it as though it might move. His ears were forward, and every few seconds his nose twitched, catching the scent that had triggered his reaction in the first place. Daniels stepped out to stand beside him, and without touching the lunchbox again, he radioed in for backup. "This is Officer Daniels at Oak Ridge Elementary requesting immediate bomb squad response," he said into the microphone clipped to his shoulder. "Possible hazardous material detected by K9. The dispatcher's voice came back instantly, "Copy that. Units are on the way. ETA 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes felt like a lifetime. Teachers peeked through the front office windows, their faces pale. The principal stood nearby, anxiously watching the road for the incoming units. Daniels kept a careful distance, Bruno never breaking his watchful stare. The arrival of the bomb squad was both a relief and a new source of tension, the large, black van pulling up in front of the school, the men and women in heavy protective gear stepping out with equipment that looked both alien and frightening. One of the technicians crouched near the lunchbox, scanning it with a portable device. Daniel stayed silent, letting them work, though every instinct told him to stand guard. Bruno, sensing the seriousness of the moment, didn't so much as flick his tail. Inside the school, the children had been gathered in the gym's far corner, sitting cross-legged on the polished floor. Mrs. Moore tried to distract them with a story, but their eyes kept darting toward the doors, their little ears straining to catch bits of conversation from the adults. Ethan sat apart from the rest, staring down at his sneakers, his small hands fidgeting in his lap. His thoughts were a mess. Why would Bruno bark at his lunchbox? Why would Officer Daniels carry it outside? And why was everyone looking so worried? Meanwhile, outside, one of the bomb squad members gave Daniels a quick glance. "We're going to open it carefully. Could be nothing, but the dog's reaction says otherwise." Daniels nodded grimly. Even if it was nothing, he knew that to Bruno, it had been something important enough to sound the alarm. And that meant they couldn't take chances. Slowly, deliberately, the technician began unlatching the lunchbox, using tools to keep his hands at a distance. Daniels held his breath. Every sound seemed louder, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of birds, even the faint shouts of children from the playground on the other side of the school. The latch clicked open, the lid lifted, and what they saw inside made the technician's face tighten in alarm. At that moment, Daniels didn't yet know what it was, but he could tell from the look in the man's eyes that Bruno had been right to bark at the moment the lid of the lunchbox creaked open. Every person standing nearby seemed to lean in just slightly, though none dared get too close. Inside, at first glance, it appeared completely ordinary, a neatly wrapped sandwich, a small packet of crackers, a red apple that gleamed in the sunlight. But tucked beneath the sandwich, hidden so it couldn't be seen without lifting the food out, was a small, opaque plastic container sealed tightly with tape. The bomb squad technician's gloved hands moved slowly, carefully removing it and holding it at an angle for a better look. Even before the container was fully out of the lunchbox, a faint but sharp chemical odor escaped into the air, one that made Daniel's nose wrinkle and sent Bruno's ears flicking backward in irritation. The technician gave a small nod toward his partner, his tone low but urgent as he said, "Yeah, this is bad. Real bad." The container was immediately placed into a specialized hazard-safe evidence bag, its contents unknown but already dangerous enough to be treated as a serious threat. Not an explosive, the lead technician confirmed to Daniels, but definitely a toxic substance. If ingested, it could have done serious harm, maybe even been fatal. "Your dog just stopped a poisoning." Those words landed heavily. Daniel's jaw tightened as he glanced toward the school building. Knowing that Ethan was somewhere inside, completely unaware how close he had come to a tragedy. Bruno sat proudly beside him, still watchful, his body relaxed now but his eyes alert, as though he understood that his work was done, at least for the moment. Inside the school, the principal had stepped into the gym to give the teachers a reassuring update, careful not to cause panic. She explained that there had been a safety concern with one of the lunchboxes and that the police were handling it, making sure to tell the children that they were safe. But when her gaze met Ethan's, she hesitated. How much should she say? Ethan looked up at her with wide, questioning eyes, but before she could speak, Daniels entered the room with Bruno at his side. The kids immediately perked up at the sight of the dog, some even smiling again, but Daniels' eyes were fixed on Ethan. He knelt down in front of him, his voice gentle. "Ethan, I need you to tell me a bit more about your neighbor. The one who packed your lunch today." Ethan swallowed hard, glancing nervously at Mrs. Moore before speaking. "His name's Mr. Hargrove. He lives 2 doors down. He's, a little strange sometimes. Mom says he gets angry easily, so we try not to bother him." Daniels listened intently, his mind piecing together the situation. The toxic substance, the fact that Ethan's mother hadn't packed his lunch, the neighbor with a history of unstable behavior, it was starting to form a deeply unsettling picture. Without scaring the boy, Daniels asked, "Did Mr. Hargrove give you the lunch this morning himself?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah. He said he wanted to help because Mom was still asleep. He told me not to open it until lunch so it would be a surprise." Daniel's stomach turned at those words. A surprise, indeed. He rose to his feet, excused himself quietly, and stepped outside to where the other officers were now speaking to a detective who had arrived on the scene. Within minutes, a decision was made. Officers were dispatched to Mr. Hargrove's home while another escorted Ethan's mother to the school to speak with authorities. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Hargrove had been harboring resentment toward Ethan's family over a minor property dispute months earlier, something petty, but in his warped mind, enough to justify revenge. That revenge had nearly cost an innocent child his life. By early afternoon, Hargrove was in police custody. The toxic substance was sent to the lab for analysis, and the local news was already beginning to pick up whispers of the incident. Back at the school, Daniels returned to Ethan, kneeling down once more. "You're safe now," he told him softly. Bruno made sure of that. Ethan's eyes welled with tears as he reached out to hug the big German shepherd, who accepted the embrace with quiet patience. "Thank you," Ethan whispered into Bruno's fur. The moment was simple, but powerful, a child's gratitude for a life he didn't even realize had been in danger until moments ago. Daniel stood back and let them have that moment, knowing that no medal, no ceremony, no words could truly measure the value of what had been saved that day. And yet, the thought lingered, what if Bruno hadn't been there? What if the demonstration had been scheduled for another school, another time? Sometimes, fate places the right hero in the right place at the exact right moment. And on this day, that hero had 4 legs, a keen nose, and a bark that refused to be ignored. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Oak Ridge Elementary was quiet again, though the events of the day still lingered heavily in everyone's minds. The police presence had gradually thinned, the bomb squad van long gone, and the last of the news reporters had packed up their cameras. But in the front office, a small gathering remained. Ethan, his mother, Officer Daniels, and of course, Bruno, lying at the boy's feet like a living shield. Ethan's mother was still shaken, her eyes red from tears, as she kept one arm protectively around her son. "I can't even put into words how thankful I am," she told Daniels, her voice trembling. If Bruno hadn't, she couldn't finish the sentence, her throat tightening at the thought of what could have happened. Daniels gave a small, reassuring smile and glanced down at Bruno. He was just doing what he was trained to do. He's a good boy. The best. Bruno's tail thumped lightly against the floor at the sound of his handler's voice, but he didn't move from his spot beside Ethan, as if unwilling to let the boy out of his care. Ethan reached down to run his fingers through Bruno's thick fur, and for the first time since that morning, a small smile broke across his face. "You're my hero," he whispered, his voice barely audible but full of sincerity. Bruno responded in the simplest, purest way, by leaning his head into Ethan's hand, his amber eyes soft, as if to say, "You're safe now. That's all that matters." Outside, the school parking lot was nearly empty except for a few lingering cars. A golden light bathed everything, giving the day's end an almost peaceful glow despite the chaos that had unfolded hours earlier. Daniel stepped outside with Bruno to let him stretch his legs, and as they walked, his thoughts kept circling back to how quickly the day had turned from routine to life or death. He knew the kind of danger they faced on the job, but seeing it target a child, one so innocent and unsuspecting, had struck a deeper chord. Later that evening, the local police department held a small ceremony in the station's community hall. Word of Bruno's actions had spread quickly, and the chief wanted to recognize him officially. A modest crowd gathered, officers, community members, and a few reporters with cameras ready. Daniels led Bruno onto the small stage, and the room erupted in applause. Ethan and his mother were there too, sitting in the front row, their faces glowing with gratitude. The chief spoke warmly about the role of K9 units, about their courage, loyalty, and the critical role they play in keeping the community safe. "Today," he said, "we are reminded that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes, they have fur and 4 legs." With that, he bent down and placed a shiny medal on a ribbon around Bruno's neck, engraved with the words, "True Guardian of the Community." Bruno, ever humble, simply sat there, calm and steady, as if the applause and attention were just another part of his job. After the ceremony, Ethan walked up to him and crouched down. He held out a brand new chew toy. Bright blue with squeakers inside, and placed it gently in front of him. "This is for you," Ethan said softly. "Because you saved me." Bruno picked it up carefully, gave it a single squeak, then set it down and licked Ethan's cheek. It was a small moment, but one that left everyone watching with warm smiles and watery eyes. That night, as Daniels loaded Bruno into the patrol SUV, he gave the dog one last scratch behind the ears. "You did good today, partner. Better than good, you gave a kid the chance to grow up." Bruno settled into his seat, content, his job for the day done. Across the city, news stations ran the story, showing clips of the ceremony and photos of Bruno with his medal. People commented online, calling him a hero, a lifesaver, a reminder of the quiet courage that often goes unnoticed. And somewhere, in one small home, a boy named Ethan went to bed feeling safer than he had in a long time, knowing that his new friend was out there, watching over the city. Sometimes, the most powerful acts of heroism don't come with grand speeches or dramatic music. They come with a single bark, a sharp nose, and an unwavering instinct to protect. And if Bruno's story touched your heart today, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to K9 Era, because there are countless other tales of loyalty, bravery, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their K9 partners waiting to be told. Bruno's bark saved a life, and that's a story worth remembering forever.